Hello YouTube, welcome back to the channel. So I didn't get a chance to make the video first, although we did talk about this last night. We talked about the Beckett new grading scale, the proposed grading scale. And I guess I kind of lucked out because even though we had the discussion last night and also Neo Cards and Comics joined us, so Neo came on and we chatted about this for quite a bit, had a lot of fun with it, chatting about it with the chat and with everybody else. I was going to make a video talking about this, giving a little synopsis to my thoughts on the new Beckett grading scale. There was a fiasco between what happened with the Mint Collective in terms of the display they had, them changing it, having a whole chart, and now I come back from running errands most of the day. I'm about to make the video and do a little synopsis of a couple of different things, and about an hour ago, Beckett comes out with this. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to run out and immediately make a video, but it's just as well because, as I said, we discussed it on the live stream last night. Neo joined us, and then Neo, of course, had a video ready to go about that, and then had to make another video. So kudos to him for already being able to do it. So I guess he gets two videos out of it. I only get one because obviously I'm catching up on this now. But about an hour ago, Beckett came out with this post on Instagram, and amongst others. But let me read this one real quick, and then we'll talk about it. And more than anything else, I have my thoughts on it, which I'll share with you. But at the same time, I'm also share a couple of thoughts about kind of people's reaction to it, because it's one of those things that I think that is more indicative of where we are in hobby-wise in terms of how people just keep giving certain opportunities to certain companies, while at the same time, as soon as a transgression happens with another one, they immediately like end it. They're like, that's it. These guys should be out of this whole thing. And Beckett has always been a weird one for me in this space, and I'll kind of give you a reason why. But anyway, first, the announcement from Beckett is, dear loyal Beckett customers, we are grateful for the feedback and insights you have shared with us over the past 48 hours. Your passion for the brand and loyalty is truly remarkable, and we appreciate your support. After listening carefully to the feedback you've all shared, we have decided not to make any changes to our grading scale at this time. We will keep you updated with an official announcement later next week regarding improvements to our grading scale. We thank you for the continued trust and loyalty to Beckett. Please continue to share your thoughts and feedback directly with us. So a couple of quick thoughts off the top. This is almost exactly the same thing that happened some months back when Beckett had I think it was at the National, they had displays for a new Beckett slab that they had plastered all over their booth at the National. But at the same time, or it might have been the National before, but regardless, it was at the Beckett booth. They had these new slabs being shown with new labels and new fonts and everything, and they got hammered with a bunch of feedback on it. And then they kind of had to turn around and say, oh, well, these are proposed. We're just trying to get your feedback. Beckett has a very strange way, if I take them at face value, Beckett has a very strange way of getting feedback in terms of committing to something that people can see and then having to answer questions about it. And once they get enough of that feedback, then they kind of backtrack it and run it back. Now, the second thing I want to quickly add is that I understand the date on the calendar. This was not an April Fool's joke, because the only fools that would come out of this are Beckett, and the only fools that have come out of this are Beckett, and the people that kind of continue to defend them or try to give them kudos for this. I'm not giving them kudos. In the end, this was probably the best move for them at this point. But at the same time, there is something to be said for just, you've made a commitment, you've decided to do something, and just accepting the consequences. There is a reason why they felt that they needed to adjust their grading scale, and having an announcement later next week regarding improvements to our grading scale means there's still going to be some kind of a change. But you went through all this other trouble, and what initiated this whole thing was that at the booth, they had a display where they showed what looked like the top of a label with 495 subgrades and showed a 10 grade on it. And immediately people started to question this, and they kind of said, well, this isn't exactly what it is. And then they came out with a chart showing an incredibly complicated thing in terms of different subgrades leading to potentially 3 different versions of 10, including a pristine 10, 2 gem mint 10s, the black label 10, of course, which is a black label pristine, and then the 9.5 going from being a gem mint to being a mint plus, which immediately would impact a whole bunch of cars that are sitting there in kind of the min gem category and a bunch of other levels. And in the discussion we had on the live stream, Neo was able to kind of cite that 85% of them would get adjusted. I believe adjusted down. I forget the exact configuration. But the point is, when you're adjusting that many different ones that fall under these categories with these subgrades, and the questions that this would lead regarding 9.5s that don't have subgrades, how do you deal with those? And how do people who actually have these cards already, either from a collector standpoint or from a dealer standpoint, do you resubmit them? Do you deal with the consequences? Do you just leave it as the old label and let somebody else try to figure that out? And then how do you comp all these things, these different complications that we just started the conversation on? But then immediately within, overnight, Beckett comes back. This is all still happening while the Mint Collective is occurring. You had a bunch of feedback over the last couple of days, and now Beckett has had to release this. This was not an April Fool's joke. This was a company that obviously is willing to make decisions without looking into getting this kind of feedback first. They basically do something, get a bunch of backlash, And then when they get enough backlash, they backtrack it. They run it back. This is an incompetent company. This is a company that isn't addressing the actual issues they have. If you want to adjust the grading scale, I can see an argument for it. I get it. Try to simplify it. That's fine. But at the end of the day, to this day, to my knowledge, and if somebody has heard something, please feel free to let me know in the comments. I haven't heard anything regarding making adjustments to the holder to make it harder to counterfeit, which was an issue well over a year ago, maybe 2 years ago now. I forget how long it's been. That hasn't been addressed. That hasn't been changed. That to me is a bigger deal. If the only real big change that we had is they got rid of the paper labels. That's fine. But at the end of the day, that doesn't move the needle. And for people who continue to use Beckett, I'm sitting there and I ask, once again, why? And this entire whole thing, once again, this is the second time they've done this. They released something that looked like they were going to announce it. They got a bunch of bad feedback. They kind of pivoted, they hemmed and hawed, and then in the end, they kind of walked back and said, well, no, that isn't what we actually meant. No. In this case, they're not saying April Fools. They're saying we got a bunch of feedback. We've decided not to make any changes at this time, but we're still looking at making a change. They haven't gotten away with the idea of making a change. But once again, is the grading scale the first thing you should have been working on? Is the grading scale the biggest issue? They've made some updates to the website, but the website still has a clunkiness. It still has things that don't quite work right. Is the grading scale really the priority that should be for the grading side of this company? And if you're holding these Beckett cards, at the end of the day, if you're a collector, buy the card, not the slab. I get that. And that still holds true, even today, regardless of what Beckett has done, one way or the other. But at the same time, there is something to be said for confidence in the company that is doing it. If the company is consistently showing you they're wishy-washy on decisions, they won't stand behind a decision. If they get enough flack, they'll back off. Well, if they're making decisions that require them to do that constantly, you should be asking yourself if that's a company you want to be doing business with going forward. I know there's a lot of Beckett fans, long-term fans that want to give them the benefit of the doubt. They'll give them strike 1, strike 2, strike 3, strike 14. During the entire run-up, the entire boom of the pandemic, Beckett was quiet. They made mistake after mistake after mistake. This isn't strike 2 or strike 3. This is strike 13. Obviously, we're just looking at the biggest ones, but they've made a ton of mistakes along the way. Communication mistakes, errors like this. This is the second of these type of errors they've made. And I'm sure they'll make another change. But the question is, will they ask for the feedback from people they trust first? Do they have people who identify as collectors who can say, hey, if you do this, this is going to be the perception. People are going to ask these kind of questions so that they have answers to those questions before they do it, not after, not reacting. Everything they've done here is reactionary. None of it is thinking ahead, being proactive. And at the end of the day, even after you do this, you're going to get responses. So you can even see from the comments here, you got suggestions. Make a focus group, which probably would have made sense. Suggestion, convert all 9.5s to 10 to Gem Mint 10. Keep your pristine and black label. Done. And that's one way you could have done it. But again, you would have wanted to get these suggestions ahead of time. But right here, this comment here, thank God. But this makes me and a lot of other collectors not trust your services anymore. And that in a nutshell is the thing. I kind of wish I had the chance to see make a first video, but it would have been kind of fun for me. But at the same time, I might as well just deal with what we've got here now. You backtracked it. In the end, that's probably for the best because it reduced a lot of confusion. The fact that you needed a chart to explain it to somebody meant that you made it more complicated than it needed to be. And you brought up a bunch of, concerning questions that somebody would have to try to figure out for themselves. Should I even continue with this company? Do I keep the cards that I have in these slabs already in the slabs, or do I make an adjustment? In this case, for now, you can kind of leave it as is, but for me, this whole thing undermines any confidence you would have in this leadership group. This leadership group has shown they don't know what they're doing, and they don't understand even how to begin to try to figure out how to make these decisions. So they did a 180-degree turn. I guess congratulations. I joked about it on the live stream. I said, maybe they should hire somebody to say, hey, just a prank, bro. Well, I guess they kind of did, in a way, even though they don't call it an April Fool's joke, and they didn't say just a prank, bro. They just look like the April Fools. So April the 1st and the April Fool is Beckett. The company, not the person, but at the same time, this whole thing was silly. A lot of the rollouts of this stuff doesn't feel like it's a real coordinated plan. At the end of the day, a little bit of transparency in terms of saying, hey, we're working on some of these things. We'd like to get your feedback on it. We're looking at the grading scale. Say you're working on trying to update the holder. That would be nice. Say, hey, we're still working on the website to get it a little bit better for a couple of things. Do you have suggestions? Get the suggestions beforehand so that at least somebody's on board with it, so that if you do decide to make the change, you're not starting off from the standpoint of everybody's surprised that you would go there and then asking you what the hell you're doing. That's really what it comes down to. So I wanted to make a video talking about some other stuff as well, and I probably will. But and I've got a couple of cards, a pickup video that I'm going to make, so I'll probably record that for later. Maybe I'll put that out on Sunday. But I wanted to talk about this since obviously this came up, and it's been about an hour since they came up with this reversal. So here we are. Anyway, so there you go. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday and enjoy the rest of your weekend. More videos coming up on the channel, and from your perspective, just out of curiosity in the comments, regardless of whether you agreed or disagreed with the original idea, does this whole walking it back after you made up a decision that apparently wasn't fully thought out, at this point, is your confidence in Beckett undermined? If you are a person who was hanging on to like the last vestiges of that Beckett brand, maybe you were a big Beckett fanboy from back in the day, are you done? Is this the last straw, or are you already done and this was just kind of another nail in the coffin that has already been buried for some time? I'd be curious kind of where you sit on it, or is this one thing where like you just kind of sit back as an observer, it doesn't move you one way or the other, and here we are. So with that said, more videos coming up on the channel, live streams Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern time as always, and then we'll talk about whatever's going on, and probably we'll have some fun with this next week, because I'm sure we'll have a little more time to absorb it, and hopefully, and like I said, they say there's an official announcement later next week, so we'll see if between now and next Friday we get another shoe to drop from Beckett, and I can't even imagine what else they would try to do at this point. Maybe they'll pick one of the simpler suggestions and then go with it, and there you go. A proper grading scale a week after it probably should have happened in the first place. With that said, like if you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Thanks very much, and we'll catch you in the next one.